Welcome. I'm glad you're joining us. And this is our third class. So I'm going to ask anybody, how did cooking go last week? Did anybody do anything fun? Alan?
Let's see. I I did do something. It wasn't one of yours, but I was missing stroganoff, and I looked up a vegan stroganoff recipe and modified it a little bit. Am I getting an echo?
Yeah, we're
Yeah, yeah,
all
yeah.
echoey.
You're
I could
echoing?
only get about half of what Robbie said.
Sorry.
I think it
Maybe I
helps if
should go.
everybody.
Maybe I should go get my plug. Hold on a moment. You guys talk between each other.
The stroganoff recipe called for vegan sour cream, but instead I used coconut cream and added a tablespoon of vinegar, and that worked beautifully.
Ooh, that sounds delicious.
It was very good. Yeah, and we were having something besides pasta, so I wanted to make it kind of a standalone dish. So besides mushrooms, I put in thinly sliced cabbage, which I fried with the mushrooms, and
Ooh,
that worked very well.
nice.
Well, it's good that you're experimenting.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, one second here. This is the hard part. Um, it seems like the plug is a little bit too big for the computer, and it kind of, there we go. So maybe that'll work better. I don't know. Am
It
I
sounds
cutting
good,
out?
Chundy.
No, you're
Okay.
not. We hear you.
Okay. All right. This isn't going on, Sridas. It was.
That's a big improvement.
It's fine. I don't know why
So
it's clipping.
why is it red like that?
It's clipping.
Oh,
I don't know why.
okay. All right. Anybody else? That sounds great that you experimented. Uh,
Yeah.
Now you said you didn't have the vegan sour cream, so you used coconut
Coconut
cream.
cream and a tablespoon of vinegar.
Is that what they said to do?
No, the recipe called for vegan sour cream
So why did you put the vinegar in it? Do you did it
because
just
the coconut cream is not sour at all.
okay? Well,
And
that was a good experiment. I don't know if I would have thought of that. I might have, but yeah,
it came out great.
wonderful. Has
That
anybody else made a vegan stroganoff?
I have. Um, was a recipe Emily gave me with I made the almond milk and then the cashew cream. It was
Yeah.
really tasty.
Yeah, that was what I was going to suggest. And next week we're doing pasta, so I thought we'd try a cashew cream type thing so that we can see everybody can see how to do that, including me. I haven't done it, so partly, Robbie, just so you know, I am a trained French chef. I'm not a vegan chef, but my husband is vegan, and so I'm experimenting with doing things vegan for him, but also cooking to honor the tradition that I adore and love. And but have had to kind of change our diets, to for health reasons. So anyway, today we are doing a classical French way of cooking, and I'll tell you, this changed my life. It changed my life in the way I cook, and the confidence that it gives me to create my own recipes. Just like Alan got in the kitchen, he used his super conscious self, and was able to channel a little bit and kind of, do a little of this and that, and it turned out really well. So I applaud you. And let's begin with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Lord Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Teshwar, our beloved Guru, Paramahansa Yogananda, saints and sages of all religions, humbly we bow at thy feet. Thank you, Divine Mother, for thy presence in our lives. Help us to be continually growing as instruments for thy blessing to all. May it infuse our cooking with thy love, thy joy. We are forever yours. Guide us home. Om peace. Amen. Okay. So, I have a little guy who's coming in the door. Anyway, so I'm in my kitchen farther this week because I tried my camera over the stove, but it wouldn't reach with my computer. So maybe next time I'll try something else, but I've got to have it all hooked up to my computer. So I'll try to talk you through this as much as I can so you can see. So the 6-step cooking procedure is what we're starting out with. We are making a roasted tomato soup, and this is actually one of the very first things I learned in chef school. And I remember last week we talked about cutting, and I forgot to tell you one important thing. If you can visualize an apple, biting into an apple and tasting it, and then visualize cutting an apple in 2 or 3 sections and tasting it, which one has more flavor?
Cut apple?
Cut apple. And the reason is for that is because you're exposing the cut in more than one way, so the flavor is released out into whatever you're making. And so if it's a salad or whatever, so you're going to have a lot more flavor. So the same goes when you're cooking on top of the stove. Often I hear in the chef world, mushrooms, mushroom this, mushroom that, mushroom this, mushroom that. And I'm allergic to mushrooms. So I can't really use them in my cooking. And sometimes I'll just say, okay, I'm going to let it go. I'm going to cook for everybody else and just not eat it myself. And I've done that and gotten very sick, but I have done that. And to make a point that mushrooms are wonderful. So you will probably not be getting you might get a recipe from me with mushrooms, but they do definitely add flavor, but you don't necessarily need them in vegetarian cooking. So I want to show you how you can create a foundation in your cooking that releases a lot of flavor, and also on the bottom of a pan lifts that flavor up. So it's like lifting it up in super consciousness. So it's like a yoga pose. We're lifting it up off the pan, the bottom of the pan, so all those flavors aren't lost. Now, how many of you grew up with meat, right? And you always saw your mom, right, scraping all that stuff on the bottom of the pan and making a gravy, right? Well, with vegetarian cooking, you don't have that, but you do. It's called fond, F-O-N-D. and you do have it, but it isn't as visible when you're just cooking with vegetables. So the very first thing you do, as I spoke with last week, let me step back a bit. So on the recipe today, I already put the recipe in the oven so that it could get started. And basically what I did was, I'll show it to you when I bring it out. It's 4 tomatoes, and I chose the beefiest ones I could find and 2 heirlooms. The heirlooms didn't look very good. It's obviously not tomato season right now. So you would do this recipe most likely in the summertime when you had a lot of tomatoes, which is the last time I actually cooked it, and it was absolutely out of this world. And but tomato soup to me is comforting, nourishing, reminds me of my mom sitting me when I was sick with a cheese sandwich, so it brings back these wonderful memories we all have. So it's just kind of a favorite for me personally. But it's one of those recipes that I start off with, and then I begin to add a little of this and a little of that, and find that it's just, perfect. Oh, yeah, I did that this time. But anyway, so today is a basic recipe that is you have the tomatoes, you have leeks, and I'm sure everyone knows what a leek looks like, right? You know what a leek looks like? See, you can see that. I cut the bottoms off. So you basically cut up to the green part, but I left a little on because I want to show you the 6-step cooking procedure. And I did not put carrots in this today, but you can put carrots in it. And that, all the carrots does is it just sweetens it up just a little bit, makes it a little bit sweeter. Because there's so much acid in tomatoes, you want to add a little bit of sugar or sweetener in your tomato dish. So that's something to think about at the very end, and we'll talk about that. Garlic. Oh, I didn't add the garlic. But what I did was I added shallots. Now, I never knew what a shallot was until I went to school. Does everybody know what a shallot is? They're these little brown things. I cut off they look like a little red onion, actually. But if you have not used shallots, I am like, this is one of my favorite things to use. It is absolutely incredible. It tastes amazing. It's a cross between an onion and a garlic. So it's really, really good. But it doesn't, it has a smoother flavor than both of those. So it's really, really good. And a lot of times what I do, I used to have a little small Cuisinart, and I would just pop them in the little baby Cuisinart, and they'd be ready in a minute, and then I'd put them in the dish. But today I'm going to have to cut them. So I put some shallots in, and I drizzled it with olive oil. I did not, it's just a season with pepper, but I did not do that, and I'll tell you why. When you're cooking, the flavors, if you add salt and pepper too early in your cooking procedure, it begins to saturate the food, and it also begins to just, when it cooks down, it becomes more and more intense. So I tend to, and maybe this is just me, but I tend to not put hardly any salt in it till the end. And that's the 6th step on the cooking procedure, is the actual finishing. So, and then basil. Basil I'll add at the end as well, because basil is so fragile that you don't want to put it in there and have it burn up. So, what I did do is I'm going to give you a little plug because I love this stuff, and we usually buy quite a bit of it. It's the Ananda farm at the village. They're Italian herbs. So they create this sweet basil, thyme, oregano, marjoram, rosemary, and sage. I mean, obviously, you can do this yourself with all of these herbs, which I totally recommend you doing. But in the case of my husband, he likes to use it just. He's not one to go out and pick his herbs, so this is something that he uses fast, and so I did it today just for convenience sake. So, but these are very, very fresh. They just came, and that's another thing we could talk about a lot of on herbs, on how long, and spices, how long to keep them in your kitchen. And it's usually not more than 3 months. I hate to tell you, they go bad really fast. So you want to make sure that you're using them up or rotating them out. So, or putting them in the compost because they lose their flavor. You can have them on your shelf and use them longer, but they really go bad quickly. So if you
Are they-
can imagine like taking a rosemary, which I do a lot, and I'll just hang it up for a while. Well, after a while, it's like all brown, and I don't want to put it in my cooking. So, yeah. Somebody have a question?
Well, they're fresh, but they're dry, but they're freshly dried, right? Is what you're saying.
Yeah. Now, one time, I mean, you can dry your own. Like I did this just recently. I took some sage. We talked a little bit about that last week. You take the if it's parsley, let's say it's parsley. You can take the parsley or you can take the sage. I cut it up very, very tiny. I'll rinse it and squeeze out as much of the moisture as I can and lay it out on a piece of paper towel. Or you can put it on parchment paper in a like on a sheet pan and just leave it for a few days and then put it in a container. This one was really funny how it worked out. I didn't do all those things I teach everybody, but I just put it in. I had rinsed it and put it in here, and I noticed that it was still very soggy. But now it's all dried up, and this is sage and all ready to go. So that's pretty much. I got these little containers online. I really like them for my spices. We're slowly moving things over. When you have two cooks in the kitchen, it's tricky because each one of us like different things. So I have to train my husband about where to put my stuff and that kind of thing. So, okay, so I'm going to go ahead. I want to talk about pans. I'd really like to get some new pans right now. I'm at the point where I would like to spend some money on pans, but we're very small kitchen and we don't have a lot of room, so we're just making do with what we have. But this is a really great pan. It's been a wonderful one for me. But I want to show you to see this little lip on the bottom of this. You want to make sure that you have some type of a indentation or a lip on the bottom of your pans, because that is like the copper base on the bottom, and it helps the flow of heat all in the pan so that you have an even cooking. I am not a Teflon person. I don't really believe in it because of this texture or this technique I'm going to show you doesn't really work in a Teflon pan very well. I've tried it at my daughter's and it's like, everything doesn't stick. So I don't know. It just doesn't come out as well. The flavor doesn't come out as well. I just have gotten a cast iron skillet for the first time. So I'm learning about cast iron skillets, and So I'm liking it so far. I have not made any sauces or anything pretty fancy in it or anything, but I'm liking the way it cooks and it heats up quick and that kind of thing, and the flavor's good. So I like it. So really look at your utensils that you use, and that goes for knives as well. Make sure that you have a sturdy knife. This particular knife has been with me since chef school, but one night my stepson and my husband made pizza, and they were cutting the pizza, and they left the knife in the oven and closed the door, but had turned it off, but it was still very hot, and it totally melted the whole. I'm really lucky it didn't do anything to the blade, but it melted the whole handle of it. So, but it still works. And actually, this knife has not even been in. I hate to say it, but in since '97 has not been sharpened. So I need to get it sharpened now. But because you can hurt yourself harder on a dull knife than you can on a sharp knife. So if you're at all afraid of knives, which I was totally afraid of knives when I started, this one is it's made in Germany, and it's oh gosh, Mester. But make sure whenever you get a knife that you see that the blade goes all the way through the handle. Now you couldn't with this particular one because of the handle, but you want to make sure that that is something that when you see a lot of knives, when you look at them, they're like that. So this is your best tool, especially as a vegetarian. You're cutting a lot. It's a lot more prep than when you're cooking say a chicken for dinner and a side dish. So anyway, so a good knife is really, really important to have. Also, a good steel is good to have, so you can in between, sharpening your knife. So this is basically all I've done, but you could take it to a professional. You should probably take it to a professional, maybe every 2 years or a year, whatever, depending on how much you use it. And so when you're holding your this, you just come down like this on one side, and then you come up on the other side. So that's the blade, and then I've got some other knives in here too that are helpful, but I'm not going to show it to you right now. So I'm just going to cut up this. First off, the very first thing I'm going to do is turn on the stove. Get the pan hot. Okay, you want a hot pan before you put cold stuff in it. And then I'm going to cut up my onion, which I already did. So I'm going to put my onion in. So this is the first step. Oh, I forgot to put the olive oil in. Let's see. Olive oil, you could use, you can use, with this particular thing we're doing olive oil. Coconut oil, of course, or avocado oil is also. Avocado oil has a really low smoke point, so it doesn't smoke as much. I find in this small kitchen that my olive oil just there's smoke everywhere. So and we don't have little fans in here, so I have to keep the windows open and keep the door open and that kind of thing. So that's just something to know about. So then I'm going to just chop my leeks up in just little rounds. And with leeks, you want to make sure, especially if you buy these at a farmer's market, you want to make sure that you get down in the centers, because they're just these little, let me see if you can see this. They're little accordions, right? So they all come out. I'm gonna place that in my pan. And actually what's happening is the water that's on those leeks is hitting the bottom of the stove or the pot. And so you're just gonna brown that up. And now this is actually happening in the stove right now. This exact same thing is happening in the stove. But what I wanted to do is to show you, because I would have done this anyway, is to show you on top of the stove the same technique. So you're make sure that your ingredients are pretty much the same size, and they don't really matter how big they are, because when you're using this for a soup, you're going to puree the soup anyway at the end. So it doesn't matter. You want them to be consistent, the size, except for if you use a garlic, it's going to be a lot smaller. But so you just go ahead and cut this up, place it in your pan, and brown it. I often have a little tiny bit of water on the side if they're cooking too fast and say something else isn't cooking enough, and so I'll have a little broth you could use. You're very organized. So you just start cooking in this pan now. This is the first step is browning. Got a little skin on there. I'll take that off. So let me show you what it looks like. So it's just browning. Now I want you to see on the bottom of the pan is all kinds of little bits. So like, it's part of the onion that may have cooked faster and it gets like browner quicker. That has tons of flavor. So I do not mind if my onions are a little bit on the dark side, because we're releasing all those flavors on the bottom of the pan. And they become, even if you're like cooking and you burnt something, don't worry too much at this stage. What I'm going to show you is, let me get it down just a little bit. It's called deglazing, and what deglazing does is it takes all those impurities or those things that are stuck in the bottom of the pan, and it lifts it up. So where does it go? It goes into your dish. It gives you all that additional flavor. So you want to use an acetic acid of some type, or something with acid. So I usually look at my recipe and I say, oh, okay, white wine would be the best with, like, say, a potato soup. Or today we're going to use a red wine that's going with tomatoes. You might I use a lot, like in cooking with Asian food. I love rice wine vinegar. I love it. I usually get a bigger bottle than this, but it adds that sweetness, and it's just great. And then I'll use, to top it off, I'll use a little bit of the sesame oil at the end to put on the dish with sesame seeds. So let's see how we're doing. Okay, so it's actually a little farther along, so I need to pull my thing down. Okay, so let me show you now. You can see the little bits of the onion that are on the bottom of the pan. Can you see that? So I want to still use that. I don't want to pick it out. I mean, I guess if you have like really burnt piece and you're you're concerned about it, you could pick it out, but I usually leave it in. So then you take, I'm going to use this red wine, and wine, the alcohol burns off in the first 10 seconds. So you don't have any alcohol in your food, but you have the flavor. And so I usually always use wine in my cooking. Especially at home. A lot of times in a non, it just depends on what I'm making, but at a non-dye thing I may or may not. So now that acid that you have on the bottom of your pan is released up, or the impurities, and it's pretty clear now. Let's see, where's the cookie? So it's pretty clear at the bottom. No, you can't really tell, but it is. And it's all back up in your food now instead of on the bottom of your pan. It's really, really magical. Then the next thing you would do is you would add your, I'm going to wait until the tomatoes come out of the oven, which they're almost there. Let's see, actually they are there. They've been in an hour or so. Wow, I'm as good as a cooking show here. Okay. So here's what the pan looks like. Okay, so it's all roasted. All the veggies have roasted for an hour at 425. The very first time I made this at school, we put tomato paste on there. And that's an option. I didn't do it today, but because the last time I didn't do it and I didn't need it, I don't want it to be too tomatoey. You know, you want to have a balance, and sometimes it can have too much of that kind of tomato feeling. So if that makes sense. And you would use tomato paste, and you just kind of rub it all around on the veggies before you put it in the oven. So this has leeks now. It has a tiny bit of herbs. It's got the shallots. You could add an onion if you wanted. Here again, we're just playing around with flavors. And there's a couple that have burned. I won't add those, but the tomatoes are nice and toasty. And again, that adds more flavor to your dish by roasting these versus just placing them in the pot. Also, I should say, the reason you would use tomato paste versus using like tomato sauce is that with tomato sauce you've got a lot of liquid. Well, you've got a lot of liquid from your tomatoes as well. So you don't want too much liquid. So now I've just got this basic clump of, you know what, I'm going to move the camera so you can see. Now I just have this basic clump of stuff, tomato dish. Okay? So that's your foundation. Now I'm going to take the, turn it way down, and I'm going to add my broth. Last week I talked about the bouillon. I can't believe it's...
John D,
Yes?
would you point your camera up again?
Yes. Thank you.
Great.
So I can't, what's it called? Better Than Bouillon. And you can buy this. Wow, what section is it? I think it's in the soup section. Usually it's kind of high. I don't know why they put it up high, but it's usually up high. And oh, I guess we haven't opened this. One came from Costco. It was such a big one. We got it at Costco. I just thought, wow, this is awesome. If you have any kind of allergies, you might want to look at what's in this. I know one person who can't have yeast, and so she never liked me cooking with this at the Ananda kitchen. So if you're cooking for other people, you just have to be aware that it does have yeast in it. But usually what I do is I actually pre-mix it with water, hot water first before I pour it in, but it doesn't really matter. But that way I don't have this huge clump in the bottom of the soup. So I might put on a little bit of water here just out of the tap and kind of mix it in. Does anybody have any questions so far? So I think we're on step 3, which is adding the liquid. So first
My question, I'm sorry, and you might have gone over the previous sessions, but that was going to be my question. What steps so far? 1, 2, 3. So what was one?
is you heat the pan and you put you always heat your pan first and put the you never want to put cold stuff in a cold pans and then bring it up to temperature. You want to get your oil hot and then you bring that up to a pretty good degree and then you start adding your ingredients. So you want to make sure that you've prepped all your ingredients before, which I didn't do today. I only did the onion, but you can get it all ready and then start watching it and stirring it. The second part is deglazing it with vinegar or a white wine, red wine, some kind of acid material or mixture that releases the fond from the bottom of the pot. And now we're just letting it cook with a liquid. So when you're cooking on top of the stove, especially soup, you never boil your soup. You simmer your soup. So you want to bring it to a full boil first and then turn it down. When you're cooking with, let's say, broccoli or anything that has a lot of green in it, you want to make sure, and this goes for steaming too, you want to make sure that you, if you want to bring it to a boil, that's great. But always remember to take the lid off every once in a while. Because what happens is all of those gases from the green chlorophyll, they have nowhere to go. So what happens is those green gases go back down into your food. And that's why you have wilted broccoli. That's why you have that brown broccoli, it's because, and it smells really bad. It's because you haven't released those gases. So you can, if you're steaming something, you can put the lid on to get the hot water hot, but then just fan it, just bring it back and forth and back and forth. And then when you feel it's done, I usually don't use the lid much, but when it's done, then you rinse it in cold water and it stops the cooking process right away so that it retains the color and the beauty in the vegetable. So you get, especially like for salads, if you're doing like a broccoli and you're putting it in a salad. But if you're just doing a soup, you wouldn't need to do that. Like you're doing a broccoli soup. But I definitely would take the lid on and off because you don't want your broccoli to turn brown, while you're cooking. And it just tastes awful. It doesn't have that. it has a kind of a cast to it. It's a kind of, the cauliflower, those kinds of, I can't remember what family they are, but they, pardon?
Cabbage family?
Yeah, there's a word for it, but I can't remember the name of it right now. But they're all part of the same family, and so they release this
Cruciferous
gases.
vegetables.
Pardon?
Cruciferous
Oh,
vegetables.
thank you, Alan. So you want to make sure that that gas is released. So what happened to my spoon? Oh, here it is. So I'm just going to, and if you want to put a little more wine in at this point, you could, but it seems to be okay. So I'm just going to mix my bouillon, and this recipe, again, you have to just kind of play around with it. What it says on the top of the container, she said they're not like bouillon cubes, but it says 1 teaspoon of better bouillon equals 1 cube. And then that equal with 8 ounces of water. So that equals to 8 ounces of water. So this is 1 tablespoon. Let me see where my teaspoons are. Oh, here's a half. So we'll do 1. I never measure this stuff, but I'm going to measure for you guys because I feel like I have to. And again, when you're making something, this recipe calls for 2 cans of vegetable broth. So that's 28, that's about almost 30 ounces. So 30 ounces would be roughly
4 times.
about 4 cups of, give or take just a little bit. So right now I'm just stirring the broth in here so it can dissolve, and then I'll add my water separate because I don't want the big, see how it clumps at the bottom? I don't want those big clumps in the soup. I kind of am funny, I like it to kind of be more smooth than that when I pour it in.
Gandhi,
Yes.
do you ever use a microwave? For example, if I were doing this dish, I would put the water up in the microwave for it to dissolve. Are
You
you
can. Yeah, you can.
Some people are against microwaves.
Pardon?
Some people don't use microwaves.
Yeah, I mean, you can. I just used the teapot today, so, you can just use whatever's you want. Okay, so this is pretty thick. So I'm just going to go ahead and pour the broth in. And the recipe, I believe, calls for it to be covering it. So obviously you want a little bit more than that because it's going to condense and cook down. So we're adding the broth. Let's see, I need 4 cups. So I added 2 cups. So here's a little more. So it's pretty much covering it now and it's loose. But if I feel like I've added a little bit too much, then it's going to consolidate down as it cooks. So I'm going to bring it back up to a boil. I'll put the lid on for just a few minutes to bring it to boil. Then I'll take the lid off and let it simmer. So you want it at a simmer, never at a full boil. So this will take a second. So I think we're on the 4th stage. Are we on the 4th stage? What does it say? I don't have my notes in front of me.
Third was
Add the liquid and then what?
I don't know.
Mary, what does it say? Do you, Mary, you're on mute. I'm sorry. Looks like you have
I'm
your.
sorry, I'm not looking at the recipe. I can though.
Oh, no, it's not in the recipe. It's, I sent out another piece of paper that showed the 6-step cooking procedure.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that till this morning.
Okay, let me look. Maybe I have it here. Hold on a second. Where would I put it? Okay, here we go. I should have it. Let me see.
I see 3 steps in the original recipe, and you sent a second page.
Here we go.
which
I have
showed
it.
the
Okay.
Stovetop procedure.
So we've heated the pan. We've sauteed. That was the second step actually. The third step is we deglazed the pan, and now we added the liquids. So we're on the 4th stage and turning into the 5th stage. So the 5th stage is actually having it simmer and release and skim off the impurities. So pretty much this has to do mostly with meat cooking, when you're taking off the extra grease on top that you don't want. So that mainly has to do with that. But there is times where you may have put in a little bit too much olive oil, so you can at this point go ahead and just spoon off that. And you don't want to spoon off too much because that's your flavor, right? So, but anything, those little bits of black chard that you don't particularly like in your cooking, that are coming up to the top, you might want to take those off at that point. So you're just letting it cook now, and I'm looking for my spoon, and just stirring it and seeing if anything comes up to the top that you feel is too much, which right now this for what I have, I haven't seen anything yet that I wouldn't keep in here, so there doesn't seem to be a problem. So now we're just kind of waiting. So what I thought would be fun for this next week is for you to take this 6-step cooking procedure. I'll resend it out to everybody so everybody for sure gets it. And you can go ahead and try the roasted pepper or the roasted tomato dish. I just said roasted red pepper. You could do this with red pepper too. You could put the tomato and red pepper together and just do that as roasting in your pan before you put it in your soup dish. That would be really good. I mean, we have that at Trader Joe's, right? So why not make it ourselves? And when you decide what you want to combine, I can look it up for you in the vegetarian Bible, and you can tell me, and then I can give you some good herbs and things to combine with, maybe other veggies and that kind of thing. So just kind of look and see. I want you to be comfortable with doing this, and you'll be surprised. So just look like, okay, right now I have potatoes, and I see. Oh, I didn't realize my husband bought onions. I didn't need the onions today. So looking at what I have at home, to me that looks like a potato soup, and I know I have kale, so potato kale soup, and I don't have a recipe, so I'm going to try just using kind of what I heard her say and try the recipe myself and see how it comes out. Because in cooking, you don't need a recipe. In baking, you do, because baking is a completely different science. But in vegetarian cooking, are in cooking on top of the stove, it's a little of this and a little of that, and a combination of this and that. You have to be really good about writing things down. And I like to make something and then I will immediately sit down afterwards and write it down so I remember what I did, so I can do it the next time. And or ask, I'll say, oh, I should have done this. Next time, do this, So I'm always I keep so many food diaries, that I know that I could just quickly go to, and then I have the notes. And it can be just as easy as like, I just got this little journal, and I just put the recipe right in here, and then I have my notes of what went good and what didn't go good, or what I did differently, and so that I can always refer back. Like I had some friends over for a light meal. They were traveling from California, from the Baja, and we wanted a light meal. So I made something and I thought, God, what did I make that day? And I was really glad I had it written down, Or if I'm doing like an event for 50 or 60 people, I always keep a journal of everything I do, from the shopping and the ingredients to all the way through how it's served, how it's plated, everything. I keep tallies. And so for you at home, Alan, write that down, what you did, so that you have that next time, so you can repeat it or improve on it.
And
So,
send,
yes?
I said, and he can send, I would love to get.
Yeah, I'll send it to the group.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me see how we're doing. Okay, this is actually a little too high. Now it has started to foam on the top. So I'm gonna just scoop off that foam and place it over to the side, because it's just extra. I don't know what it is actually, but it's just pretty much extra olive oil that's kind of floated up to the top. When you're cooking, this step is all really pretty personal, and it's a little bit trial by error, of how your taste buds are, and kind of what you like, but mainly you want to make sure that you're, I like any kind of raised butter or whatever. Sometimes I just take it off, just it's too much. It's actually not incorporated and it's a little bit too much in the cooking. So, but this is coming along. So how I would finish this off, because well, it might be done in time. I have not bought one of these, but I totally love these. They are incredible. I should buy one. I borrowed this from the kitchen. And it's a what do you call it? Just a wand, and you just put it down in there. And these are awesome for all kinds of sauces and soups. Because he has a blade on the bottom. And like when you're doing tomatoes, oh my God, or not tomatoes, potatoes, it's just incredible, to get all those little pieces all ground up. So that's why we said at the beginning, it doesn't really matter what size they are. But if you wanted to have a super smooth sauce, or a super smooth soup, there are little, I don't have one. Oh, this is the finest that I have for a strainer. But there's other ones that are even finer. They're called chinois. And the little grates are even finer. So you get an even finer smooth, a real silky smooth soup. So that's if you didn't want anything like that, like a vichyssoise or whatever. My husband is a very much, if he doesn't have a lot of stuff in his soups, then he doesn't get full. It's like he likes potatoes and carrots and celery stuff. So he really likes a lot of stuff in his soup. So I usually don't strain it out much here at home, but it just depends on what kind of a dish you want. And so you would strain it at the end, which is called um, the the garnishing and the finishing touches, and so that's like finishing your soup. So that's the very last step. So this is coming along okay. I wish it were a little thicker, but it's not. So how I would finish this off, and I was actually, there's two things that they I think in this recipe it may have called for I changed up that recipe when I wrote it to you. So it says it has a sweet smoky flavor. Well, it has a little bit of a smoky flavor. I think it might, if you use that smoky paprika we talked about last week when we put on the cauliflower, you could get a little bit of smoky flavor. So remember, when you're adding things, you want to make sure that you add a little bit first and add more versus adding too much, because you can't take it away. So you can test it out. But what I love, and this was really hard to find, it's called liquid smoke. Let's see if it even comes into focus here. Not coming into focus, but it's liquid smoke, and it has water, natural hickory smoke concentrate. So it's healthy. I mean, I don't think you'd eat a lot of it because you don't use a lot of it. But I love this in like split pea soup. It's like the best. And I thought today I'd try the tomato because I think I've done it in tomato before. And you just use a tiny, tiny bit of it. You don't want to oversaturate it. You just want it because it's just a little liquid. So what I'm trying to get at is if you put that in the soup at the beginning, it's going to concentrate and then taste not right. So you want to make sure that your salt, your pepper, and in this case, you might add a little sugar, which I probably will, and a little bit of this liquid smoke at the end. Then you will have your final taste of what your soup should be. So I many times I probably was graded so lowly on did you test this? Did you put salt on this? Because in the French way of cooking, once it's set on the table, there are no salt and pepper shakers on the table in France. And the chefs are very particular about everything being done in the kitchen and not at the table. It should come perfect to the guest on the table. Now that, everybody likes their soups a little bit different, I guess you could probably ask for salt. That would probably be mortifying to a chef. Believe me, I've been in those situations where a chef got really angry because somebody asked for salt. But anyway, just that's why you do everything at the end of your cooking process. And believe me, it does make a difference. It does make a difference. So this is coming out pretty well, and I'm just stirring it now and again. It's actually turned up a little bit too high, but if you can turn it down low and let it go a little longer, all those flavors are just going to be enhanced. Now, if you wanted to add cream to this or a substitute, there are actually some really good vegan creams. So there's a coconut cream that I used to use. I don't know if I've used it in soups, but I used to use it in my coffee, and I just loved it. And on cereal, like oatmeal. So I know Trader Joe's sells some alternative creams. So if you wanted to add cream to this to make it a cream soup, You would have to heat your cream up, and that's where I probably would heat it in the microwave. Not too much, but just so it's not, totally cold. And then once it's heated, then put it into the soup so it doesn't curdle when you put it in there. So you don't want to put cold mixture into a hot soup, especially creamy. It will curdle. Um, so I would do that. My husband doesn't like that, but if it were me, I I would love that. So um, then another thing you could do is obviously add herbs um, before you blend it. And again, they have flavor, but they have not burnt at all. They already had herbs on there. For a garnish today, I thought I would take a little bit of roasted sun-dried tomatoes and put these on the top because we love these. Oh, these are already cut in julienne. That's right. So I don't even have to cut them. And some basil. So I would do my chiffonade, which I showed you guys last week. I'd roll up my my leaf and cut it in strips and place it right on top of the soup before I served it. So I'm going to take this off the stove and I'm going to bring it over here. You're not going to be able to see me, but or you can see me a little bit. I guess I could turn the camera. And I'm going to put the wand to it. So it's nice and chunky now. Has anyone ever used one of these wands before?
I love it. I love it.
I love it too. I'm like, I had it in Seattle and in the kitchen there, and I never had one at home. I always borrowed one, but I said, please don't ever get rid of this. And then it did break, and they bought another one because I said you gotta have it. It's just something you gotta have because you can put it. Some recipes say put it in a blender, but it just goes all over the place. It's like you lose half your soup. It's a mess. So plus it's hot. It's just not functional. But this is really functional. And you can use this for mashed potatoes too. So you'll find other. So it's just going to turn on. I'm just going to put it right down here. Gotta be careful so it doesn't splash on you. I forgot to add the liquid soap, the liquid smoke. I'm going to add a little of that in. Oh, that's too much. This is probably about 1/8 of a teaspoon, not much. Pretty much that's done. And I forgot to make a little crouton. So I'm just going to put this in the toaster and then cut it up. So you can make your croutons in the oven while you're cooking on top of the stove. So you can use a little vegan butter and sand it on. So my husband will have a lunch today when he comes home. And then cut it up real small and use that as well. You can put olive oil on there, put it in the oven. You could put a little of the cheese if you have some vegan cheese. we're not that excited about the vegan cheese at our house. So if you guys find a vegan, there's one brand that I really do think is good. It's called I think it's called Ciao, CAIO Squares by Field Roast. I think it's Field Roast. And it usually you find it with the tofu. And they have several different kinds now. They have a cheddar. They have I think they have a Yards Girl. How do you ever say that? They have a couple different ones, but the thing is, I don't think the melting quality is that high. As far as they don't, when he makes it, he uses it, and I melt it for him, like for a top of a burger or whatever. It doesn't really melt that well, like regular cheddar would melt. So I'm going to take this soup and ladle it out, maybe. Oh, I should have got my ladle out. Okay, so I'm gonna ladle my soup in my dish. It smells good. And again, there's a lot to color presentation. And I'll talk a little about maybe that next week, about how to really present your food in a way that's enticing. And we talk a lot about the colored and eating that color, that vitality, what Master talked about with tomatoes, I think I should have looked that up for sure, but I think it's tomatoes are humbling. I should have looked that up. I'll look it up next time. He doesn't talk about all the vegetables and fruits, but he talks about a lot of them. So I'm just going to take this. Now you could get really fancy if you want to and put this, maybe just on the side, of your dish. But I'm going to actually cut it and make little tiny croutons out of it. I would normally making croutons, I would normally make them in a big pan and put them in put the bread in, put the olive oil on them and sprinkle them with the herbs and stick it in. But we like having like a crouton or bread or something to go with the soup. So I just sprinkle the top. So I probably should put them on first and then the tomato over the top of that. But so, here's a little tomato. So here we go. So you can see. That also adds a little bit more texture to the soup. So he feels like he's getting a little bit more, and serve it with a salad or serve it with your main course. Or you could just, if you wanted to create this as a base for something else, you could add more veggies to it, add more. And what you would do is I would make the soup exactly how it is, and then saute on the side maybe some kale or potatoes or whatever, and add it to the soup as whole pieces, like bigger pieces. That way you could make it a little heftier if you needed to. So that's, again, how you experiment and figure things out as you go. So, does anyone have any questions? So next week,
I have a
I have a
question.
uh-huh.
You said that this recipe was life-changing for you. What
Yes.
is the reason for that?
Well, it's the 6-step cooking procedure was life changing.
Yeah.
How you it gave me the confidence to be able to create my own recipes. It gave me like, okay, I know I have to start off. You start off with what they call mirepoix, which is usually celery, onion, and carrots. So see, today I didn't use the celery or the carrots, but that's what they usually say. And then those cook down and cook down. Then you deglaze the pan. And then if you were doing like a potato soup, I would add the potatoes in next, saute that all together, a little bit, then add the liquid, and then cook it down. And then at the end, take off the impurities. And then at the very end, test it. Taste it, test it, see what it needs. I didn't taste this. Test it and see what it needs. I should have done that before I served it, but we're running a little late. Wow. I think it's perfect. I could use a little sugar in there, which you often see in any tomato soup. It just brings out makes it less acid. But with this, with the roasted or with the liquid smoke, you almost don't need it. I mean, it's just perfect the way it is. So, yeah, it's good. I'll tell you, the shallots is also one life changer for me. Using shallots in my dishes and leeks, both of those were life changing. I had never used before, and now I tend to grab them more often, especially when they're in season, because you can just make anything with them, and it just makes things taste so much more rounded and bold, and just really, really good. People will think you're a gourmet chef. They make all the difference.
Candy, I have a question.
Uh-huh.
I'm not a fan of liquid smoke.
You don't have to use it.
And you mentioned the smoky paprika.
Yes.
Would you also use about an eighth of a teaspoon or less?
Yeah, I would test it out. I haven't used that. I think I have used it once or twice, but I'm not remembering. Oh, I made last year. I made some. I think I made a squash soup, or no, maybe it was a pureed. It was a puree dish that I did it with. Yeah, I'd go really light on it first and just taste it. Yeah, an eighth of a teaspoon would probably be okay, I would think. No more than that at first, and then or just sprinkle them and see how, it's up to you and your flavor. So
Thank you.
but that's in many vegan recipes, the smoky paprika. I keep reading it, and everyone says use it for that kind of a smoky flavor that you miss from meat. There's one thing I really want to do, and I hope I have time. I possibly might have time. Master used to make his own wheat gluten, and I have been looking for a recipe for a very long time, and I found two actually. And I went to price out the flour you need, and it's $22. So I'm kind of like, oh,
Oh,
I don't know. I don't know if I want to. But again, if it made enough of it and it made a lot of it that we liked it, it would be, kind of fun and something to have as far as an alternative meat source. So and because Master used to make it, I feel kind of like I've always wanted to try it. And anyway, so I'm debating. I still have a couple more places to look. I've only found it online for $22, but I've been looking at a couple stores. I haven't found it yet. So I still have to go to Whole Foods, and I still have to go to the Seattle or the Sacramento Co-op to see if they have it any less expensive. So I'm not sure why it's so expensive. But basically, they call it tempeh in this recipe, but it's not tempeh because tempeh is actually fermented, and this recipe it's not fermented. It's just frozen, but it's not fermented in any kind of way that I can tell. So I really want to try it. I just, you just got to try stuff sometimes, and that's what cooking's all about. Refinement and trying and refinement and trying and refinement. Okay.
Yeah,
So
now-
next week we're going to do pastas. And this dish, oh, I should tell you, this tomato dish, if you were to not add so much liquid, add the tomato paste to it, you can make a tomato sauce. And one of the very best sauces that I ever had was when we combined red sauce with a white sauce and served that over pasta. Oh, but see, I was eating cheese and cream and all that stuff, so it just was so good. And I have gotten away from doing that, but it was a really fun combination, of doing like just keeping this really simple, adding not as much liquid, add more tomato paste, and you get a thicker sauce, and then adding a white sauce with it. So, I mean, maybe we'll try that and make, the cashew gravy or the cashew sauce next week, and see how it tastes. I just can't. This is the hardest part for me, that you guys can't taste the stuff. Anyway, so any suggestions that you have, or things you'd like to see me try, for the class, please just let me know. I don't know if I'll have time to do pizza, but I do have a pizza YouTube that I did for the kids. I believe last summer I could send you. I have a really good pizza recipe, and I definitely could send that to you. Homemade pizza is just the best, and when I can, I love to make homemade pizza. But there are a lot of good crusts out there now too, so you can just add your own ingredients on top. Any other suggestions or thoughts? So if you need help with ingredients, I will be more than happy to look up in my vegetarian Bible for you, and see what kinds of fun things that might whet your appetite, so that you could try to use this in the next week and see how it goes. And remember, you don't have to use the wine, but you can use apple cider vinegar if you have it, or a vinegar, white wine vinegar, something fresh. Remember, the fresher the better. Not something that's like been in your fridge or been in your cupboard for a long time. I usually do not buy those wine vinegars that you see that they're out there. Um, I don't really like the flavor of them as well as I do some, but the rice vinegar I love. I love that one. I use that a lot on veggies too, just when I'm sauteing. Um, One time we made caramel. Oh, this is a great little side dish. Caramelized onions, where you just caramelize them, caramelize them, caramelize them. You take a little tiny bit of a vanilla bean. I don't know if you've ever done this before. They're quite expensive. I was like, oh, can't we grow these here in California? But you split it down the center, and all of the little seeds from the vanilla come out. And so you've basically cooked down your caramelized onions. You take those seeds and you put it on top of the onions and swirl it around and add the rice wine vinegar to it. Oh, it's to die for good. And you can use that as a side dish, or you can use that, like, say, on top of tofu, to add a little bit more flavor. It's really, really yummy. You can also use vanilla beans in that punch I was telling you about too. So you can use punch.
Chandi, what white wine do you like to use?
I don't have a favorite. I go for my budget. They always say the higher quality wine, the better the food, but I don't go extravagant on my white wine. I just, sometimes when I was in Washington, I used to, get the local fare that was the best. I'd read the little things, but I never spend more than like $7 or $8 for a bottle of wine. But it just sits in the back of the fridge for whenever I need it, so it could last for a while. Another thing I like is I really like port wine, and I love to reduce port wine. It's you take it and put it. You got to watch it really close because it sugarizes very fast. So you have to really almost stand over it. But you put it right. You could do this with balsamic vinegar too, but you got to really watch it. So you put it on top of the stove in your pan, and you let it reduce and let it reduce, and it just becomes this nice little sauce, and it's very sweet. And you can pour that, like, there's an endive recipe that I make that is endive with a little goat cheese, and then you pour this sauce over the top and add a pecan, and it's an hors d'oeuvre, and it's just to die for. So I do like port wine. It's like, and I was trying to figure out what this is. I think it just doesn't even say. It just says essential red. So usually I look for things that have a good, a good saying on them, but also they're on sale. Now, if a French chef would probably tell you what he really liked, but we have to be practical as yogis, so it has the same kind of flavor, I think. So, any other questions? Thoughts? Okay. I didn't give you a ton of recipes this time because I looked at my notes and it's like, wow, I don't have very many. I do have a white cannelloni bean one that I have to look up, that I made up. And so I'll look for that and send it to you for sure, because that one is very good. The Greens cookbook has a lot of good soups. They have good soups in that book. I've used that a lot. Another book is Deborah Matson's Vegetarian Cookbook for Everyone. I think I gave that away when I came here because I didn't have room for all my cookbooks. And so I ended up giving that one away because it's thick. And I didn't have room for it. It's funny because I got my cookbooks down to like a little tiny bit, And then I found another box. I don't know where I found it, but I found another box that was full of cookbooks. And at that point, Suridas had already left on the truck, and so I had to bring it with me. But we were trying to get things pretty much down to a bare minimum. But I've bought in cookbooks since I've come. And sometimes people give them to me too. They just give me books, cookbooks. Okay. Well, there's no more questions. Thank you so much for joining me today. And if you have a favorite pasta recipe, you can shoot it over to me, because I'm still looking, but I definitely want to try the cashews. Definitely, because we have not done that here. I tried one substitute with yeast, and I wasn't that happy with it, so I won't be repeating that one. But if you have a good cashew one you want to share, that'd be great. And any other, during the week, if you find others that you find are good, then you can share as well. Okay?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chandi.
Uh-huh. Thank you. And Robbie, I will send that stuff out to you.
Yes, thank you.
I hope I still, let me see. I think I've got your email.
All right, this is yeah. I can send it.
Okay. Roberta, right?
Yes,
Edmondson?
yes.
Yes. Okay. I have it.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
All right,
Bye.